Gamers of today have the fortune of having so many games to play on so many platforms. Recent games, retro games, remakes, fun games, awful games, games so bad they're good, you get a picture. Good games will contain memorable characters, stories and worlds, and with time will create new games sharing the same title, creating familiar games while integrating new concepts. Over time, that group of similar titles become franchises. If you like a particular game, chances are you may find more to your liking in its franchise. There are many who are beloved, such as The Legend of Zelda, Metal Gear Solid, the FromSoft Souls-like, and so many more. Naturally, we all have one that we like more than the others, mine being the Fire Emblem franchise. Being a Westerner, I've been introduced quite late to Fire Emblem, seeing that the first game was made in 1990 and my first introduction was by Super Smash Bros. Melee on the GameCube in 2001, where Marth and Roy were playable characters. At the time, me and my friends had no idea who they were, and it's not until the release of Fire Emblem 7 or the Blazing Blade in 2003 that we could have a chance to experience what kind of games these characters were representing. One of my buddies saw the game at the store and thought the red-haired character on the front was Roy, so he bought it and got disappointed when he learned that the game's protagonist was called Hollywood. He also got stuck at the final chapter and couldn't finish the game, so he let me borrow it so I could check it out as well. I brought it home, booted it up in my first generation Game Boy Advance, and fell in love with the gameplay and sprite quality. After giving the game back to my friend, I gave him some tips. He played the game again, and we found a common appreciation for this newly found game. He eventually bought Sacred Stones, which he also let me borrow, and it fueled the hunger for more, getting Path of Radiance for myself once it was out. By then, I was hooked. Path of Radiance was massive compared to Blazing Blade and Sacred Stones, and with my limited English skills at the time, going through the game was a challenge, but ultimately, it was the game that made me want to hone my English comprehensions and skills, because I really wanted to understand more of the story and character relationships. Which I did, and it became my favorite game, until Radiant Dawn got announced for the Wii. A direct sequel, happening 3 years after the events of the first game, making almost all the roster of the prequel available to use and 3 class tiers. I couldn't wait for it to come out. I remember watching the return of the Grail Mercenaries cutscene on YouTube and feeling so eager to dive into this familiar world. In case it was not obvious already, I believe the Tellius series to be the best of the franchise, and I'm going to die on this hill. I was devastated when it was revealed to be a financial failure, but was relieved when Awakening became one of the best sellers and revived the franchise, bringing a new wave of players into the community. Since then, the series evolved into modernity for the better, but not without ruffling some feathers along the way. There's more to it than this oversimplification, but it's not the story I want to focus on right now. I also got familiar with some of the previous titles in way of emulation, most notably Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light and Genealogy of the Holy War. I have dabbled with Gaiden and Thracia 776, but not enough to say I know them well. All in all, I think I can at least call myself an enthusiast of the franchise, and it all comes back to my experience with the Blazing Blade, the subject for today. Released in Japan in April 2003, and less than 7 months later in North America, Fire Emblem The Blazing Blade is a tactical RPG developed by Intelligent Systems and published by Nintendo for the Game Boy Advance. Its directors were Takeo Kaneda and Kentaro Nishimura, produced by Toru Narihiro and Takehito Izuchi, supervised by Nintendo's Hitoshi Yamagami. It's the 7th installment in the series and the first international entry. The late worldwide introduction was in part because the tactical RPG genre was not that popular as of yet, and localization was particularly challenging in the first years of the series due to certain limitations. The thought of localizing the franchise was still an idea floating around for a while, but the introduction of Marth and Roy in Smash Bros., as well as the success of its sister series Advance Wars in the West, got them convinced to give it a shot. It was the right decision, as it was considered a financial success and created a whole new batch of fans, including myself. In this video, I will go through the basics of the game, its concepts and mechanics, and the 3 paths available to participate in, going over all the available chapters and characters you can find throughout the story, as well as covering some of the secrets you can come across. So this is your first and final spoiler warning if you would like to try it out for yourself. Let's dive in. The story takes place on the continent of Elibe and acts as a prequel of the previous game in the series, The Binding Blade. The story revolves around Eliwood, a young lord of FIRE, embarking on a quest to find his missing father. He will be accompanied by 2 other lords, Lindis, a nomad woman from the plains of Sake, and Hector, his good friend and brother to the Marquess of Ostia, one of the mightiest territories in the Federation of Lycia. During their travels, they will come across valuable allies and vicious enemies, uncovering a terrible conspiracy that will threaten the world if left alone. You will be able to participate in the events of the game by incarnating a tactician canonically called Mark that will act as your self-insert, as the main characters will address you during certain events. Gameplay-wise, it is a turn-by-turn strategy game that is played on a square grid board on which you control the character's movements and actions. Each character has their own class, stats, and abilities that you will need to get familiar with to use them to their fullest. They can level as they gain experience, giving them stats upgrade, depending on probabilities unique to each character. They can be leveled up to level 20, but each base class can be promoted from level 10 and onwards into a more powerful class, which resets their level to 1 so you can upgrade them further. You can gain experience from combat, but certain units also have actions that they can get experience from, such as thieves that can get experience when they steal items from enemies. Each character has a fixed amount of HP that can grow when you level up, and if it reaches 0, the character will die and will be unusable for the rest of the game. Some units, such as the main lords, will net you an automatic game over if they die, forcing you to redo the chapter from the beginning. Permadeath was still a core concept of the game, and it's not until Fire Emblem, New Mystery of the Emblem on Nintendo DS in 2010 that the casual mode was introduced, where characters retreat when defeated instead. That's why you must consider every detail for your units, especially for the characters you like. If someone other than the lords die, you have either the choice to reset the whole chapter or press on and replace the fallen unit for another one. I personally cannot let someone die. I recruit everyone and no one gets left behind. I'd rather restart a whole chapter rather than let someone die, even if they won't be useful for my game. Boring way to play, I know, but it's my pride on the line here. To keep your characters alive, knowing about stats, classes, and weapons are crucial. Strength or magic is the unit's power. This value is added to the power of the equipped weapon to calculate how much damage you can deal. Skill dictates your chance to hit, along with the chance to do a critical hit for 3 times the damage you would have inflicted. The calculation for your hit rate is as follows. Critical calculation is as follows. Keep in mind that these values are exactly this, values and not percentages, even if they're graded from 0 to 100. There are additional values that come into play in the calculations, but for the sake of simplicity, I will only put the most basic information. Speed influences your attack speed and avoidance rate. You can calculate your attack speed by using this equation. If the difference between your attack speed and your opponent's is 4 or more, the faster unit will be able to attack twice in the same turn. Avoid rate calculation is calculated like this. Luck helps some of your rates, specifically your chances to avoid a hit or a crit, but also helps a bit with accuracy. Defense and resistance reduce the damage you take for physical and magical attacks respectively. You deduct this number from the attack total to calculate the damage that will be dealt. Move is the number of spaces a unit can move on the map. Usual tiles like plane and road cost 1 movement, but certain tiles like forest or mountains require more movement to cross. Certain classes will be subjected to movement restrictions, such as the Cavalier. Since they're on horseback, they can move farther than units on foot, but their movement cost is higher on forest, and they cannot cross mountains at all. On the other hand, some units like pirates and berserkers have movement advantages as they can move on water tiles, while flyers have no movement restrictions at all, but cannot gain terrain bonuses. Constitution is the unit's overall mass. The higher the constitution, the bigger the unit. This stat is used when calculating attack speed and influences the other units one can rescue, tying into the aid stat as well. If your aid stat is higher than the unit's constitution, you can rescue this unit. TRV or Traveler states which units the character has rescued. The element of the character influences which stat will be boosted when in range of another unit they have support with. More on supports later. Condition tells you the ailment inflicted on the unit and the number of turns remaining until it clears up. Then the classes. They represent the types of character you can control during the battle phases of the chapter, as well as the weapons they can wield, their abilities, and the general stats they'll have. These descriptions apply for enemy units as well. Lords are your main character class. They're serviceable and competent enough, having a unique weapon they can each wield and usually have good stats growth, since you'll have to take them throughout the whole game. They cannot be defeated, otherwise you get a game over. Soldiers and brigands are enemy units only. While soldiers are the bottom of the barrel enemies with the worst stats, brigands have some qualities to them as they have lots of power, are the only foot units that can cross peaks, and can destroy villages, preventing you from getting the item inside. These are common adversaries, easily dispatched. Cavaliers are mounted units generally with good all-around stats. They can wield both lances and swords, making them reliable early on. Their high movement makes them ideal to rescue allies, and also have the ability to move after doing an action like visiting a village. They promote to paladins, adding axes to their proficiencies. Knights are your frontline units, being equipped with heavy armor. While they cannot move as much as the rest of the foot units, they are useful to shield weaker units and block narrow passages. Be careful around mages, as they can bypass the armor and cook them from the inside. Knights become generals upon promotion, gaining access to axes as well as lances. Mercenaries and myrmidons are foot units wielding swords. Mercenaries focus on sturdiness, while myrmidons are focused on speed and skill, making them better to deal critical hits. Mercenaries become heroes when promoted and get access to axes, making them even more useful on the front line. And myrmidons become swordmaster who hone their crit rate even more, but stay swordlong. Archers are your main ranged physical attackers. They're usually nimble, but can't defend themselves against melee attack. They're helpful to attack enemies behind walls though, and can perform well when paired with a sturdier unit. They have a good skill stat, which makes them miss less and have some crit chance, and this is enhanced when promoted to snipers. Nomads are mounted archers proficient in mobility and skill. Despite being a mounted unit, they have less trouble crossing forest tab, meaning they can reach their targets faster. They do, however, have low HP and defense, so they are frail against most attacks, and while they are bow users, they cannot mount ballistae either. Nomads promote to nomad troopers, gaining proficiency in swords. Pegasus and Wyvern Knights are your flyer units, which hold the best movement since they are not affected by terrain. They wield lances in combat, but their stat allocation is different. Pegasi are faster and are more suited to attack magic units due to their better resistance, while Wyverns are more defensive and hit stronger overall. They are both extra weak to bows and can easily be dispatched by ballistae. They promote to Falco Knight and Wyvern Lord respectively, gaining access to swords. Fighters are your frontline axemen. While they usually have low defense and resistance, they make it up with huge HP pools and attack power. While their skill and speed are somewhat on the lower side, their brute force helps a lot to carve your way through enemies or deal great amount of damage to a single target. They promote to warriors, gaining access to bows. Pirates are your water brigands. They fit the bill with only one difference. Instead of being able to cross peaks, they can move on water tiles without trouble. They tend to be fast, hit hard, and have a fair amount of HP. They promote to berserkers that, like swordmasters, are locked to a single weapon type but gain bonus to their critical rate. Thieves are utility units more suited to open doors, chests, or enemies' pockets. While they can defend themselves with swords, their battle abilities are subpar, making them usually unreliable unless it's for chip damage. To make it up for the lack of strength, they're the fastest class and able to dodge quite deftly. It would seem that there's a way to promote them to assassins, but we'll get there later. Mages are the standard magic class. They wield elemental magic called anima and are efficient at long and close range, making them pretty versatile. They tend to be fast and hit strong, while their defense tend to be lower. They promote to sages and gain proficiency in staves. Monks are like mages but use light magic instead. They're less powerful than mages, but their skill tend to be higher, so they hit more reliably. However, their defense stats are usually abysmal, so keep them out of physical danger. Monks become bishops, gaining access to staves. Shamans are the last of the magic trio, using dark magic in combat. While powerful, their accuracy is their main weakness. They also tend to be slower due to the weight of their tomes as well, but dark magic tomes are versatile in the sense that they have many abilities shamans can use. Their defenses are also slightly higher than their magic counterparts. Shamans become druids when promoted, gaining access to, you guessed it, staves. Clerics and troubadour are your basic staff users, so they're your main healers at the beginning. They cannot defend themselves, so keep them out of danger. Since they're a bit more difficult to train, since they can attack and healing only gives you a small amount of experience, it's recommended to promote them as soon as you can. Clerics, just like monks, promote to bishops, while troubadours become valkyries, adding anima magic to their field of expertise. The bard or dancer class are unique. While there are two classes, they are shared by two characters that will fill the same shoes at different times in the game. They cannot attack and have low HP, but they are quick enough to avoid most attacks and are fast enough not to be doubled. Their special ability are either grant another unit a turn or buffing various stats. They do not promote. Lastly, the weapons. There are a variety of weapons to use such as swords, lances, axes, bows and magic, and units are only able to use those available for their class and promotions. Each weapon behaves differently. Swords are light and accurate but lack power. Lances are middle of the road, and axes are powerful but heavy and lack accuracy. Bows can hit from 2 spaces away but cannot counter at melee range. They have an interaction system called the weapon triangle that acts as a rock-paper-scissors system, giving melee weapons advantages and weaknesses. Sword beat axes, axes beat lances, and lances beat swords. Bows are out of this loop, being neutral towards all other weapons. Magic tomes are divided in 3 subclasses: Anima, Light and Dark Magic, as well as having staves. They are used by different magic classes and have pretty much the same properties as their weapon counterparts, as well as their own weapon triangle. Anima beats Light, Light beats Dark, and Dark beats Anima. Staves are neutral in the sense that they cannot attack, but have special properties such as healing, inflicting or restoring status ailment, and opening doors from a distance. The more you use a weapon type, the better the ones you'll be able to wield. One of the most useful buttons in this game is the R button, as it can give you useful or interesting information on pretty much everything. If you use it on a weapon, you can check their stats, a thing you should check regularly. Let's quickly look at them. The letter on the right of the weapon type is the skill level required to be able to use it. If it's PRF, it means it's locked to one particular unit, such as Lindis's Manicotti or Eliwood's Rapier. MT stands for Might and is the weapon damage. It is added with the strength or magic of the unit to calculate the attack power. RNG means range and states how many spaces away you can use the weapon. Hit is the weapon's hit rate and is added to skill and luck to indicate the character's chance to hit. WT is the weapon's weight and is used along with Constitution to confirm a unit's attack speed. Crit is the weapon's initial critical rate and is added to its calculation. If the weapon has a special property, it will be mentioned under its stats. Some weapons are more effective against some units. For example, bows are particularly effective against flying units, so when an archer is against a Pegasus Knight, a damage multiplier will be added to the damage calculation, making some units particularly efficient against others. All 3 Lord's weapons are strong against infantry, meaning they get a damage bonus against cavalry and armored classes. One last but very important thing to know about weapons is their durability. There's a big number on the right of their name, and this number indicates the number of times you can use the weapon until it breaks. Once it does, it disappears from your inventory and cannot be recovered, so be mindful of what weapon is equipped on your units before moving them on the field. It should be noted that unlike melee weapons, you still use durability with tomes even if the attack misses. There's a way to recover weapons' durability, but it appears late in the game and is very limited, so it should be reserved for your best equipment. I guess that covers the most important to understand basic functions of the game. The first 10 chapters acts as a tutorial for the game's mechanics, so I will cover them as the game introduces them. 10 tutorial chapters on 30 total in the game seems like an overkill, but remember that this title was the first Fire Emblem that was published outside Japan, so its concepts were relatively new to the potential audience, so it was a way to make sure players would not be too confused as they play. Also note that my playthrough is set on normal difficulty, as I play from a fresh cartridge? Alright, let's get on with it. When you boot up the game, you're greeted with a short cinematic putting you in context of an event happening 1000 years prior to the context of our story. Back then, dragons and humans were living together in harmony and peace, forged in wisdom. This peace lasted decades, even generations, until humans decided they had enough for reasons and excuses and went to war with dragons. It was a brutal clash, both sides receiving huge casualties, and this war became known as the Scouring. In the end, dragons were defeated by mankind and banished to another world, letting this one for humans to rule over. Upon starting a new game, you'll have to enter your character's info. You take the role of a traveling tactician that takes care of strategy and tactics for your army. You can enter your name, gender, and month of birth. The gender influences the sprite of your tactician, and the month of birth changes your element, but this actually changes nothing on the long run, so choose your favorite symbol and move on. You wake up in a house that isn't yours, having been rescued by a young lady that calls herself Lynn. She found you unconscious on the plains and tended to you until you woke up. She inquires politely about our travels, but before we can share our story, Lynn hears something happening outside and decides to check it out. Bandits are abound and we are in danger. Lynn decides to go and take care of them when we ask to come along. We cannot fight, but we can lead as we are tactician by trade, so together Lynn and you decide to take on the bandits. This chapter is fully scripted and is only to show you the very basics of Fire Emblem. We get our first tutorial. Ally units are blue, enemy units are red, and NPCs are green. You'll then learn how to move units on the field. The blue squares are your movement options, the red spaces are the ones you're able to attack. Once you've moved, choose the wait command. Once ended, the sprite will turn grey and you won't be able to move this character until the next player turn. Once everyone on your army has moved, the enemy turn will begin. Next turn, the game will show you how to attack. Move your character according to the range of their weapon. Lynn's sword being 1, so we must be adjacent to the enemy to attack, so we move close and choose our sword. A window full of info then pops in, showing the details and calculation of the battle. If everything looks good, you proceed to the battle and an animated scene will occur. The next turn will introduce item usage. Lynn has been hurt, but has vulneraries in her inventory. This item can restore 10 HP to the character using it, holding 3 charges in total. To proceed, you must use 1 charge to heal Lynn, ending her turn in the process, showing the player that using an item, just like battling, ends your turn, so take care to position your unit accordingly before using an item. After this, we're now ready to face the boss, Bata the Beast. Since the action is still scripted, there's no real danger here. Bata will hurt Lynn on the first turn, and she will tell the tactician to run if she's defeated. This will not happen, thankfully, as she will avoid the next attack and counter with a critical hit, showing a way cooler battle animation. Lynn will level up, and stats will have a chance to increase depending on her stat growth. They're not mentioned in-game, but websites like Serenus Forest have all the info you need to study each character should you want to do so. Some are better than others, but who you choose to train is ultimately up to you. To finish the chapter, simply move Lynn over the tile the boss was on and choose Seize. That will end the chapter and keep the story going. You then go back to Lynn's home until the next morning, where Lynn will ask you to bring her along your travels. Out of concern, you ask her if her parents are okay with this, but she reveals that her parents died 6 months ago due to a bandit attack on their village. She was the sole survivor of the attack and has been living alone ever since. Hearing her story and resolve, you then accept her request and make for the next step in your travels. Each beginning of chapter will start with a small overview of your character's travel until the events of the chapter. This time, Lynn and your tactician decides to gear up at the nearby city of Bulgur, renowned for its commerce. While shopping for supplies, you get accosted by a weird man complimenting Lynn like a simp. Lynn does not give a flying hoot about the guy and decide to go somewhere else. Another knight then arrives on the scene and scolds the hopeless romantic. We then learn their names. The green knight is called Sane and the red one is Kent. Lynn then gets back to the scene, demanding the two knights to move their horses as they are in the way. Kent obliges and apologizes, but seems to recognize the young lady. Sane then hops in, and his comment makes Lynn even more irritated, leaving the scene once again. The Red Knight goes off on his peer, as his intent has been misinterpreted and Lynn might be the target of their mission. Back to Lynn and the tactician. Seems they've been cornered outside of the city by a group of bandits who seem to know her by name and wants her dead. The two cavaliers then catches up to the pair just in time to help them fight the bandits. Lynn initially refuses, but Kent compromises by asking you to lead them all in battle. Both you and Lynn accepts the proposition and the battle starts. You'll be able to use both Ken and Sane in this battle. These units represent the classic red and green units, an archetype present since the earliest Fire Emblem titles. This refers to a pair of same class units appearing very early in the game. Despite sharing the same class, they have different stat growths, making them take different paths while leveling up, therefore making them useful in different situations. In this case, Sane is the happy-go-lucky lady chaser, good in the strength and luck department, while Kent is the dutiful and serious one, has favorable skill and slightly better base growth, except in strength and luck. Sane will ask you to direct him at the bandit, using his lance. The attack will miss and Sane will get hurt. Kent will then lend one of his sword to Sane, but not before scolding him once again for forgetting to buy one in the first place. This is the game's introduction to the weapon triangle system explained earlier. Kent will follow with a sword attack, demonstrating the efficiency of using the better weapon. Lynn will then make the finishing blow and the enemy's turn will begin. Back to our turn, Sane will ask for redemption by attacking the next bandit with a sword. The battle will begin, but both attacks will miss. This time, the terrain bonus is introduced, showing how forests make units harder to hit. Make sure to take advantage of them, as they can make a big difference in battle. Kent will move next, demonstrating terrain advantages as well. Lynn will ask to move up in the forest, leaving the bandit to the pair of knights. On the enemy turn, the bandit will attack Kent but for naught, and get smacked again. Lynn will then call Sane over so she can give him a spare vulnerary and demonstrating how trading works among units, as well as the mounted unit's special ability to move again after an action that is not fighting has been made. Then the safety wheels are off for the rest of the chapter. You may move all three units as you please, dispatch the two bandits as you seem fit, and move towards the boss of this chapter, Zugu. This bandit isn't difficult, but hits hard, so you need to be wary of its damage output. If you're not confident in attacking first because you fear the counterattack, you can always move a unit next to the boss and end your turn without attacking, letting it attack first. This way, you can guarantee survival if the worst happens and will be able to heal or move back if needed. Lynn congratulates you for the victory and finally listen to the red and green guy's story. They are knights from Caelin in Lycia, a neighboring country, acting as messengers of Lady Madeline, the daughter of Marquess Caelin, who fled her home with a nomad 19 years earlier. The Marquess was heartbroken and eventually decided he had no daughter until he received a letter from her recently, and in this letter, Madeline stated about her family, confirming that he was a grandfather. He then decided to send Kent and Sane as escorts to bring the family home, but they did not know that she and her husband were dead until they reached Bulgar, the city where we met them. This is why Kent asked Lynn if they knew each other when they first met, because she looks just like her mom, of which there are still portraits of at the castle. We also learn why the bandit we just faced knew her name. Sane mentions Lundgren, the younger brother of the Marquess. With Madeline's death, this made him heir to the throne until Lynn was found alive. This makes her the actual heir, putting a stop to the Marquess's brother's plan to take over. He wants her dead and will keep at it until she is. Kent suggests her to join them back to Caelin, and she accepts, asking you to come with. A request you accept, naturally. Just before departing for the grand journey, Lynn decides to stop to a small altar on the outskirts of Bulgar. This altar is said to attract spirits, and Sacaean people tend to go and pray for a safe journey just before departure. But as fate would have it, ruffians appear at the same time wanting to take the sacred sword resting there for themselves. The leader tries to intimidate the bishop into giving it to him directly, but quickly resorts to violence when he sees it doesn't work. He takes the sword but is unable to draw it from its scabbard, being prevented by an unknown force. The bishop explains that the spirits residing in the sword have judged the bandit unfit to wield it. This sends Glass into a fury, locking the old man away and shouting he's going to tear the temple apart. Nearby, a civilian saw everything, warning our heroes of the commotion. When Lynn hears the bandits plan to steal the sacred sword, she decides to lend a hand, starting the battle for this chapter. Right at the beginning, you will be introduced to the houses tiles. When you go over them and visit, the residents inside will give you many tips and hints for the map you're on. I tend to overlook these as I never found them useful, but they may contain interesting conversation world building wise, so visit them at your own discretion. Second turn will have a short description explaining how fortresses function. They are tiles that give nice defense bonus, as well as slightly healing the unit on it at the beginning of every turn. Enemies can also spawn from these tiles, but not if a unit is already on it. You can then move the characters freely for the rest of the chapters. There are mountains between you and the entrance, so Lynn is the only character able to cross them. That doesn't mean the cavaliers can't enter. See the cracked wall? You can attack it to reduce its durability. Once the wall's HP is at 0, it will disappear and let the knights a way in. Once inside, there's only the boss to take care of. Glass is another very easy boss, but this time he's a mercenary. Just use one of the 2 cavaliers equipped with a lance, and he won't fare long. He also drops a vulnerary, a thing that happens when an enemy has a green item in their inventory. When you beat said enemy, they will drop the green item so it can be picked up by the victor. Be sure to clear all enemies before seizing the throne to clear the chapter to get the maximum experience you can get. Lynn frees the bishop, who is thankfully unharmed and managed to keep the sword safe. He thanks her for the intervention and allows her to touch the blade and pray for a safe journey. When she does so, a flash is created, a a sign that the spirits of the sword have accepted Lyn as its rightful owner and was able to unsheath it from its scabbard effortlessly. The priest then sends you on your way with the sword, unlocking Lyn's unique weapon, the Manikati. She has a hard time to accept what just happened, but comes by with the help of her two companions. Afterwards, we see another scene involving Lundgren and his soldier, learning about the defeat of the bandits he sent after her. He brushes it off, claiming she will not survive the journey. We then learn that he's also poisoning his brother to accelerate his death so he can get to the throne faster. Now that she knows the truth of her lineage, and with a sacred sword at the hip, Lyn starts her long journey from Sake to Caelin. The first hurdle in the path is a long range of mountains, home to reckless bandits. When crossing a village in bad shape, she is reminded of the terrible events that happened to hers that fated night. But those thoughts do not deter her, they instead strengthen her resolve. At the same time, something is happening close by. A bunch of bandits are harassing a young woman, claiming one of them have been hurt by her Pegasus. They demand reparation, and by reparation, they mean take possession of the girl and the beast to sell them and make a profit. Luckily, we intervene in time and Lyn recognizes a young woman as her friend Florina, a young Pegasus knight who has trouble expressing herself around men. Florina explains that she left her service in search of Lyn when she heard that her friend had departed on a journey. She was making a stop at the village to gather information when she stepped on one of the men while landing. Lyn then tries to negotiate with the men, seeing as Florina is having difficulties shaking them off, but the men refuse to let go, giving way to the battle for this chapter. This time the objective is to defeat all the enemies on the map. We're going to face some variety of classes, but luckily we've got Florina and we'll get another unit shortly, so no worries there. Florina is pretty fast but struggle in the HP and defense department just as much as with men, and her low base strength paired with low constitution makes it difficult to keep her alive against anything else than swordsmen or mages, with something else than a slim spear, as she gets slowed down by iron weapons. I don't like her very much as a unit, but I won't deny her usefulness in some situations. On the first turn, Lyn will ask to go and visit the nearby red-roofed house. This is to show you that houses or villages with red roofs can be visited to get some goodies. Be careful, as these places can also be destroyed by brigands if you don't visit them fast enough, so always take this into account. Inside the village is a person called Will who decides to join you to repel the bandits. So we get a new unit, Normal Archer number 3. Will. I can't talk too much about him, as I never used him in a full run. Seems good though, having medium growth overall. He joins early in the adventure and has quite a personality. He is useful in Lyn's story for chip damage, but I hear people rather have him benched because he's not that good after all. After the visit, the tutorial will make you move Will to attack the mercenary over the wall to show you archers aren't afraid of obstacles. Next, we'll move Florina to the same merc to finish the enemy off. After this, you're free to move your units as you see fit. The obvious choice is to move the cavaliers forward to dispatch the archer, but that's your call. End your turn and let the enemies move. Eliminates the enemies in your way on the next turn, but you should always make Florina visit the village up north for some funds. Keep beating the enemy forces slowly but surely in the narrow passage. The enemies keep lining up and we keep knocking them down. There's only the boss to take care of now. Miguel is the first boss we faced that has a steel weapon, a better but heavier version of the iron counterpart. It does slow him down considerably, so take the advantage. If you're not confident in your chances, always let your unit close to the boss but don't attack. Miguel does not move either, so don't worry about your unit's positioning if they're not adjacent to the boss. Florina and Lynn do have special conversations with this enemy, so try to get them if you feel like it. We then get a conversation with Florina and Lynn where we learn why she's there in the first place. As a Pegasus Knight, she must join a band of freelancers to further her training. Thing is that with her extreme shyness, joining a band mostly comprised of unknown men would be a nightmare for her. This disheartens Florina as her confidence wavers, but out of the blue, Sane appears and throws out that they could be the band of mercs she joins. In addition of Will, they make quite the ragtag team. Lynn agrees, Will accepts the invitation, and we get a nice picture of our team before closing the chapter. Lynn's journey continues westward until sundown, where the group decides to stop in a ruined building for the night. Little did they know that they were trailed by bandits. Upon reaching the building, Sane makes a bit of a fuss seeing the state of the fortress, but this opinion is shared by no one else, so he lets it go. They all settle in, but seems like there's someone already here before us. It's a frail woman called Natalie who seems to have a bad leg. It's surprising she made it this far. She's searching for her husband, who is looking for work so he can cure her condition. Natalie thinks he's involved in something dangerous, so we'll keep a lookout for a man named Dorcas. At this moment, the bandits that were tracking us finally caught up. The henchman thinks they'll wait until dark to strike, but the leader says otherwise. They will strike now. Our numbers are low and there are women in the group. It's easy pickings for them big bad bandits. They quickly encircle the building and Carjiga, the boss, instructs Dorcas, his new recruit, to go to the back entrance and try to capture the women inside. He's less than thrilled to do the task, but he needs the money. Oh, the things we do for money. The group decides to hold the fort until the bandits tire out. This means that the objective for this chapter will be to survive a set number of turns while protecting Natalie. You will need to guard Natalie for 7 turns. She appears as a green NPC and you can't control her, so it's a good idea to turtle and wait for the enemy. Lynn will demand to go to the back entrance, a thing that we must do. You can freely place your units afterwards. The most logical thing to do is to put the cavaliers in front, Will on the side with the cracked wall, and keep Florina as a backup. On the enemy turn, Dorcas will attack Lynn and the other bandits will pile on at the entrance. When it's back to our turn, Lynn will mention how Dorcas looks like Dorcas, and you will be able to talk to Dorcas to recruit Dorcas to your team, seeing as you're protecting Natalie, which is Dorcas' wife. As you could see, Dorcas is not a brigand, but a fighter. Dorcas is a quiet man and a particularly slow fighter. He's still bulky and his skill isn't too bad either, but his lack of speed makes it difficult for him to keep on with the rest of the army by the end of the game. Still, who needs speed when you can one-shot? He joins you without hesitation, and the game will then introduce ranged weapons. In this case, a hand axe that you can attack up to 2 spaces away. After the demonstration, the control will return to you. Keep pushing the bandits back, but beware that on the beginning of your third turn, reinforcements will start appearing from the top right and bottom left. By this point, You can move Florina towards the spawning mercenaries to let her get some battle experience, and to let Lynn and Dorcas move towards the bottom of the map, where they'll either be able to support your front line or attack the boss. Defeating him will not end the chapter, so it's a good source of experience if you manage to reach it. The wall on the other side is sturdy enough to let Will whittle down the enemies there, so no worries. Once you've defeated the main force, you've practically won. On the last turn, I decide to attack the beachy Skarjiga. There's a forest tile we can take advantage of, and so we will. His tail axe hurts, but he can't land a hit with it. Lynn and Dorcas make quick work of him and get plenty of XP for it. Once the 7th turn is finished, the bandits will flee the premises and the battle will be won. Dorcas will then be reunited with Natalie and will bring her back to the village, but he will come back to us as he was invited to the team. Seems like the best course of action, seeing he needs the money and we're better than ruffians. Natalie agrees with the plan, so Dorcas will be back with us in the morning. The night sets up and our group settles in for the night. Morning comes and our band keeps moving west, closing in on the border of Bern, another country known for their might. Once they cross the borders, they will finally be able to put the mountain bandits behind them. And yet... Our crew chats about what awaits them in Lycia. Sane, loyal to himself, talks about an inn on the road they could stop in, daydreaming about the fair maiden that takes care of the place. At first, Kent refuses, but Lynn accepts the proposition, much to Sane's delight. Everyone seems on board, but then, bandits. It's the Ganelon bandits again, that same group we've defeated twice already. They have a bone to pick with us, to the point that even women are fair game this time around. We prepare for combat, but at the same time, a mage and cleric duo comes out of nowhere, seemingly lost. They bicker, blaming one another. The girl seems obnoxious and the boy looks exasperated as he underestimated his escort's sass. The argument is so loud that it attracts the bandits' attention, throwing the duo into our turmoil. Just like last chapter, you can talk to green units just like the red ones to recruit them. You'll have to move Lynn close to Sarah to talk to her, and you'll be able to recruit both units with one conversation. Sarah decides to join us without thinking, much to Ert's dismay. Poor guy. Sarah will be one of the 2 dedicated healers you can get, and she's pretty good at what she does. Her speed is high enough that she at worst won't get doubled. It's a bit of a drag to train her in the beginning, but she's one of the few units that should be promoted early to let her get access to light magic and the ability to defend herself. Personally, I like Sarah. She's always been a good unit in my army, but it makes me happy that there's no voice actors in the game, as she'd probably be my least liked character due to her loud mouth. Erk is a good unit to include in your ranks. He's got skill and he's surprisingly fast. He's also a dutiful guy who takes his studies and contracts seriously. Nevertheless, Erk is a soft boy and struggles with his damage output, so don't put him too far ahead of the rest of your army. As promising as he can be, I hardly use him because each time I tried using Erk, he was still weaker than the other mage you get by the mid-game, so I tend to bench him early to let the other units get experience. Back to the battle, you will get shown how healers work. Then you will use Erk to finish the archer. Afterwards, the control will come back to you, and you'll be able to move your other units as you see fit. The map is quite small, but there's a lot of different tiles, so the cavaliers might have some trouble navigating along the others. It's a good thing to let them wipe the northern units while the footmen pass in the mountains over the lake. Take the time to pass by the armory. as this one has ranged weapons, and we've got some funds in the earlier chapter, so it would be wise to gear up a bit. After that, all that will stand in your way is Bug, the last pursuer before crossing the border. He's not a challenge at all, especially because he doesn't move. It's the perfect time to use your ranged weapon and magic for an easy victory. There's only so many ways to describe a Ganeon bandit. When things are settled, Sarah and Lynn engage in pleasantries, complimenting each other until it's farewells. But Sane just had to go and run after Sarah like a tier 3 sub-white knight. He spills the beans on who Lindis really is and how dangerous their travels are. This lit a fire under Sarah's butt, who's eager to get an important person in her debt, while Urk gets thrown in without a say in the matter. You have to feel bad for the guy. We then get another scene at Kaelin Castle, where we get another glimpse of Lundgren's shenanigans. He's baffled that Lynn managed to cross the border and getting closer, and starts being more and more anxious, resorting to more brutal ways of getting what he wants. Lynn finally enters Lycia, which is just a bunch of territories bound together to create a federation. Her journey is coming close to its end, but it's not over yet. Bandits may now be behind her, but at the front, someone's preparing a nice welcome. The company decides to stop in the city of Arafin, the second biggest city in the Federation next to Ostia. The Marquess has accepted to help Lynn in her travels to Kaelin by way of supplies. Kent had already taken contact with the Marquess to explain the situation, and since both territories always have been friendly towards one another, it's only natural one would help the other. That is until a villager spots a fire coming from the castle. Looks like there's trouble ahead. A group comes at ours and corners Lindis, planning to kill her in broad daylight, but as fate would have it, a mystery man on horseback saves her skin with style by hitting the marauder right between the eyes. Kent asks for his name, but the man refuses to answer, only saying he mistook Lynn for a Sakean woman, which she is. By stating her tribe, the man acknowledges her and tells her and Kent the Marquess is in a bad spot, and as captain of the guard, he needs to rescue him. Since she knows the enemies are after her, Lynn offers to help to rescue the Marquess. The man agrees and presents himself as Wrath of the Kutola clan. Meanwhile, a thief barges in a house nearby to watch the show unfold. The resident makes a scene, but the dude pays her to stay in and she agrees. I would have done the same for a Klondike bar. Back to our group, Wrath explains that in order to save the Marquess, they must open a secret passage, which is activated by pressing 3 switches in order. If we can do that, Wrath and his men will be able to take care of the rest. He'll join us for the time being, so we have our objective for this mission and we're ready to begin. Wrath is the second highest unit you will meet in Lynn's route, being at level 7 when he joins you. He has some nice stats but rather low strength for the level he is at. Furthermore, you'll be lucky if you see a defense increase because he's one of the 4 units with the lowest defense stat growth. Nevertheless, his constitution lets him equip some heavier bows without penalty, a nice contrast that can help him damage enemies. I like his no-nonsense, silent personality, and he's a good bow unit that can last until the end of the game. First things first, we'll need door keys or a thief to open doors. Lynn will ask you to visit the house where the dude we saw earlier went into. I wonder why. Inside, the guy presents himself as Matthew and offers his services to Lynn, who refuses. But how will we open these doors? Feeling checkmated, she accepts the proposition. Matthew is a fun character. His poor fighting skills are forgiven by his jolly personality and the fact that he's a thief, so his primary use is gathering stuff around mostly. He's fast and difficult to hit, but as tough as wet paper, so he's best kept away from enemies until he can make the last hit. I like Matthew, but I wish he'd hit a bit harder. We'll have to open the door with our new unit, then use our second most recent unit to activate the first trigger. The rest of the turn can be used at your own discretion. The other red house gives you a door key, so Matthew does not have to do the rest of the work because next turn he will ask you to go and open the nearby chest. It contains an angelic robe, a stat booster that can permanently increase HP by 7 points. The best contenders for it are Florina and Lynn, but I won't judge you if you give it to Dorcas. Then, unlock the door down right and defeat the guard inside to trigger the second switch. One room inside the barracks has a chest that contains an armor slayer, a useful sword that will come in handy for the upcoming boss, revealed when you press on the second switch. All that stands between you and the third switch is the boss, Bull. This is our first meeting with an armored knight. Once again, Bull only has a melee weapon and cannot move from the switch, so it's easy picking for any ranged attacker. Urk and Dorcas are effective here, and you could always use Lynn's Manicotti if you're a mad lad, so you've got many ways to defeat the boss. The passage now revealed, our crew moves on to the throne room to find the Marquess safe and sound. He compliments Wrath, who deflects the compliment towards Lynn instead. She presents herself to the Marquess, and he requests Wrath to leave the two of them alone. Wrath obliges, and the leader scolds our heroine for the damages and the trouble behind the family dispute. Because of these reasons, he withdraws his offer to help us. Kent barges in on the conversation, but the Marquess retorts that he forgot to mention that Lynn had nomadic blood running in her veins, showing clear disdain towards the Sakaean people. Sane and Kent are at a loss for words, seeing that the Marquess Arafin keeps on insulting Lynn's heritage until she's had enough and departs empty-handed. Outside, both knights support Lynn's decision, and she in turn tells them she appreciates their help. Back in the castle, Marquess Arafin still has his blood boiling, as he would have retracted his decision if Lynn would have shown any kind of sadness or similar emotion. Wrath hears his monologue and confronts him over his opinion of Sakaeans. The Marquess fumbles, as he did not expect his guard to overhear him trying to save face. Wrath has none of it and decides to end his service then and there, going to our group to offer his services instead, giving Lynn a fat stack of coin at the same time, probably from his own personal funds, to help Lindis get to the end of her journey. Having learned in Arafin that her grandfather was bedridden, Lynn hustles to her next destination until a boy appears demanding their help. The chapter starts with a turquoise-haired boy being shooed from an inn, its owner not wanting to provide help. He did provide for him the day before, but seems to have had a change of heart after seeing that the boy and his sister were chased by evil men. Our group arrives at Cathalet, a city on the northern side of Kaelin's border. At their pace, there's about 10 days of traveling before reaching their destination. Suddenly, the boy from earlier appears and pleads Lynn to help him. Hearing him out, we learn that the little guy's sister was kidnapped. Sane's eyes close up as he hears that there's a damsel in distress and jumps right on the occasion to convince the rest of the group to follow suit. Kent opposes himself to the idea, but Lynn, hearing that a child's life is in danger, decides to help the boy even if Kent's arguments make sense. He relents and accepts her decision. Some shady guys then appear and try to take the boy away, but our heroine gets in their way and prevents the assault. For this chapter until the 10th one, we'll be able to prepare ourselves for the upcoming battle by way of the prep screen. There, you'll be able to choose who takes part in the battle, switch up and trade the items in their inventories, check the map and reposition your units. Be sure that everything is in order, as this is the biggest map we've encountered so far, so starting on the right foot goes a long way. We're going to face Shaman on this chapter, the strongest magic class. Fortunately, we're going to have a new addition to our ranks, a monk called Lucius. He will be the only monk you get in the game. As a unit, I find him pretty good, having nice stat growth in magic, skill, speed and resistance. If you see his defense rise, get a lottery ticket because just like Wrath, Lucius has almost no defense growth. Overall though, he's super useful against magic users, even anima mages. Gaining access to staves upon promotion adds to his versatility, and he's a pretty good light magic user for the endgame. Lucius will ask you to attack the enemy shaman, showing you how the magic triangle works. You will then have to move Niels besides Lucius because he's a bard, so he can make other units move again. He has, however, no attack or skill stat as it is irrelevant to his class. He's frail at the beginning, but he'll be an important character further down the line, and he can grow nimble enough to avoid most attacks, so level him up as much as you can. So, you make Niels play for Lucius and then the control is yours. Get to the right of the map and clear the enemies as you progress. If you trust your Florina, you can send her directly south over the mountain to harass the non-boss shaman down there. Just beware of the brigand if you do so. When you get to the village, you will receive some pure water. This item increases your resistance, diminishing gradually back to normal each turn. It can be used for magic-based bosses, but I hardly use this item at all. It's still good if you want to make Dorcas a temporary magical tank. Afterwards, you'll probably get stuck at the bridge. There are two paths you can go, but I generally put my foot units on the side of the mountain, while the horsemen cross on the farther path, so you can pincer the enemies preventing you from passing. Once all your units have crossed the bridge, the rest will be pretty simple. Take care of the rest of the enemies, and you'll only have Tomato to deal with. Heinz. He's not even a challenge. He's got surprisingly low power for a dark magic user. Even Dorcas without pure water can take him on without a problem. He's quite the dodgy boss, so it might take a couple of characters to take him down. Still, even if he's more difficult to hit, his low damage doesn't make him a threat. The group enters the castle, but Nell's sister is nowhere to be found. Kent reports that a group of men have been seen getting away, so maybe they had the time to flee with Ninian. We prepare to give chase when a young man appears with an unconscious girl in his arms. This is Eliwood, another main character that we will take control later in the game. He explains that he managed to rescue Ninian right under the enemy's nose as she seemed in distress. Lynn then presents her story, and he believes us without hesitation, as he knows Sakean people tell no lies. Respect is shared between the characters, then Eliwood asks Lynn if she needs help with her endeavors, a thing she refuses, but tells her he will be around for a while still, so if she needs help after all, she just needs to call. Ninian wakes up a bit later and is relieved to see her brother safe, all thanks to Lynn's efforts. The girl explains that she can make special dances but was hurt during the kidnapping and has difficulties traveling on her damaged leg. Nils asks if they can travel with our group for a bit, as they could have protection and help our crew along the way. The pair have a unique power. They can sense incoming danger. This unique ability would be very helpful, and while they know if danger is coming, they cannot do anything about it, so benefits would go both ways. Kent and Sane are on board with taking them on with us, so it's settled. Ninian and Nils will travel with us from now on. Unfortunately, the girl has lost a precious ring. Not only is it important for the children, it's also blessed by spirits, giving it exceptional powers. Taking us on the side, Lynn says she'd like to retrieve the ring, and if we accept, this will lead us to the first guide in chapter, Optional maps unlock by doing specific actions in certain chapters. Saying yes, we rally our troops and set our sights on the fleeing bandits. We learn that the group chasing Nils and Ninian are called the Black Fang. They're holed up in an abandoned fortress not too far from our position, and we're slowly closing in on them. Inside the fortress, we see a man and a woman talking together, the woman seeming like the boss of the guy. He tries to explain his failure to no avail. She wants to hear none of it. Seems like they know we're chasing them, and they plan to take this opportunity to turn their fortune around, or a worse fate will await them. Our group arrives to the destination, but the children have gotten cold feet as they're not sure if they should proceed anymore. Lynn, however, is confident that we'll manage to retrieve the ring, seeing as we gave our vote of confidence for the success of the operation. The inside of the fortress has plenty of enemies, but we could use the narrow corridors at our advantage. Be sure to include Matthew in your participants, as there are some chests to open on this map. You'll have to navigate narrow pathways while watching out for enemies that can attack you from behind walls. Fortunately, you can break some of them to create passageways and get more movement options or equip your ranged weapons to ensure a counterattack. Make your way up and take note of the staircases, as reinforcement will often appear out of them, and it will happen in this skirmish. There's also the enemy thief to be wary of, as they can steal chests and unlock doors. When there's nothing more that they can do, they will flee the scene with their loot. The chest contains a hammer, an axe-type weapon effective against heavy armor. Once you've made your way to the top, we'll have to face the main man, Bayard. As much as he doesn't want to die, this boss doesn't even move towards us to fight, letting anyone attack from afar. He has some power and skill, so you still have to be careful, but Wrath and Matthew took him down without a sweat. After the battle, Lynn tries to deal with Bayard to ensure he stops chasing the children, but he takes his own life instead, to the surprise of everyone. This makes the air feel heavy for a moment, but in the end, we've successfully retrieved Ninian's ring. Making good progress through our destination, entering the Kalen region. The closer we get, the more resistance we meet, and even more ways to try and stop us. Stopping for just a moment, we look back at all the progress we've made. Only 2 more days. Thinking about her grandfather, Lynn falters a bit. But Nils and Ninian interrupts the scene as danger approaches. Suddenly, a ballista bolt appears out of nowhere. Siege weapons are deployed now, Lundgren's getting serious, and we should do the same. Matthew will be unavailable for this mission because he has some business to attend to elsewhere. You can still take some of his inventory if needed before going in. Be sure to bring Will along if you want to use the ballista. It's optional, but it can be useful. I recommend benching Florina as well for this mission because the ballista will tear her to shreds and won't have much chance to get experience after you get rid of it. So, this long-range bow will be our first obstacle to progress. It will aim for our unit with the lowest defense, so it can be baited if you put this unit in a forest in the ballista's range. That way you can move everyone normally without fearing the ballista. It's tough to reach it fast because of the numerous enemies and forests slowing you down. Also, be sure to send 1 or 2 units to the village because a bandit is targeting it. The village contains a Lance Reaver. A sword not only reverses the weapon triangle, making it strong against lances and weak against axes, it also gives it a stronger advantage bonus, making them really worthwhile. Their downside is that they're a bit expensive and low durability. If you manage to beat the archer before he uses all the bolts, you can put Will on it and turn the table on the enemy. Honestly, it's not that useful here, as most remaining enemies are on fortress bases, giving them more avoid and healing capabilities. you can still get some use out of it to whittle down the reinforcements that appear from the down left of the map once you close in on the bridge. The boss and enemies around him will have reaver weapons as well, so use normally weak weapons on them to clear them out. They will meet you when you're in range, so keep that in mind. Only one should remain. Yogi's a knight wielding an axe reaver, so your best bet is to send a sword unit against him. The ballista won't be very effective, but almost anything but axes will bring the boss to his knees. The victory is bittersweet, as Kent mentions that he recognized some of the people in the enemy's rank. Sane says good riddance, less enemies and resistance to worry about. They chose the wrong side of the conflict, unfortunately for them. Matthew comes back to the group, claiming he was searching for information while we were fighting, and he did not come back empty-handed. He informs us that the Marcus has been bedridden for 3 months and his health is rapidly fading. Word on the street is that he's being poisoned behind the scenes, and as we've seen earlier, they're right on the money. Lundgren is behind it all, and what's worse is that there's also a rumor that a person claiming to be the Marcus's granddaughter appeared, all to spin a lie to frame Kent, Sane and Lynn as the imposters. This will make the approach to Killen Castle even more difficult. It is then that Lynn remembers Eliwood might still be around, and right now, his help will be welcome. So we turn back to Cathalet in search of another ally. With rumors spreading about us being a traitorous group, it makes it tough to advance, so we hope that Eliwood's support will turn the tide. In a fortunate turn of events, Eliwood confirms to Lynn that the neighboring territories won't interfere with the rest of our travels. Good news! Thanks to his influence, our objective remains reachable. Since the other regions are to remain neutral, that means Eliwood's hands are tied as he must remain neutral as well. It's okay though, he made more than his part. He leaves the village and we prepare to move on. There's a fog coming in, but we must press on, time is of the essence. From their position, the fastest way to Killen Castle is passing by a gate guarded by General Eagler, the next boss we'll have to face. This will be a fog of war map. You'll have to navigate carefully as ambushes will happen. To help you on your way, you can use Matthew as thieves have a higher field of view in limited visibility maps, and you'll come across torches as you play that anyone can use to chase fog around them for several turns, diminishing with each passing one. Once you start the mission, a knight will appear out of nowhere recognized to be Lord Wallace, a retired commander of Killen. He got called back to arms by Lundgren, being ordered to capture Lynn and her retainers. He demands to see the girl, as he will decide if she's an imposter or not himself. When Lynn brings herself forward, Wallace is convinced outright and even joins us without a second thought. Wallace is an unfortunate case. I like him as far as his personality goes. A stubborn old man but a kind and loyal one with a bad sense of direction. Unfortunately, he has some of the worst stat growth of the game. You might not see him again after chapter 10, and when playing on normal, he forces you to promote him as part of the tutorial. He has the highest stat in many departments compared to your other units, but over-reliance on him will make him become an experienced sink, and you don't want that to happen. Don't even bother, let him go back to his farm. So, as mentioned, the first turn will be a tutorial on how to promote your units. To do so, you will need to meet 2 conditions. First one is to be at least level 10, and the second one is to have a proper item for promotion. When you meet these conditions, you can promote a unit and give them a new appearance and a boost of stats, often unlocking a new weapon type for extra versatility. I like promoting mine between levels 15 to 17 or when they cap one of their stats. Back to Wallace, he will ask you to promote him. Unless you're playing on hard mode, which will be unlocked on your second run, you're forced into it. He gets promoted to General, brags a bit, and stops being relevant for the rest of the game. You can then place your units as you see fit. A nearby village holds the previously mentioned torch, and while there's not many enemies on the field as of yet, they will come out from the forts, so keep an eye out from them on the map. The first batch will come out at the end of your turn, so they will appear and be able to move on theirs. It's mainly bandits and soldiers, but take note of the archer so you don't send Florina too close to him. The fog will appear on the beginning of the third turn, and that's when things will get tricky. Bandits are coming from lots of sides, and the lack of visibility might give them an advantage. It's better to move slowly and let the enemies come at you rather than recklessly dashing blindly. Use the surrounding forest, or make a funnel using the terrain to control the number of enemy forces that can reach you. I like Matthew on this map, not only for his vision but his weapon as well. I like keeping him in the back of the group and let him take on the bandits coming from behind. Make your way slowly but surely towards the gate where the boss resides and get ready for a fight. General Eagler will be the first promoted enemy you will have to face. Not only has he high stats relatively speaking, but he also has two different types of ranged weapon, so no matter who you choose, you'll have to expect a counter. The most effective way of dealing with him is to bait him to use the hand axe, then attack him with Lynn and her Manicati. The boss should be low enough health to let someone take the last blow, or get obliterated by a crit. We learned that General Eagler was the former arms instructor to the pair of knights, making this victory another bittersweet one. It seems that he was on our side, showing his allegiance with his last breath. Unfortunately, he couldn't take our side as Wallace did, as he must have been blackmailed to make him cooperate. Nothing stands in our way now, the final battle approaches. A last scene plays at Kaling Castle, where we see Lundgren nagging his brother, claiming that we will never make it in the end. He doesn't even hide this game now, and urges the Marquess to die so he can take the throne. This is it. This is the end of Lynn's route and of the huge tutorial. Our confrontation with Lundgren's the only thing in our way, and it's high time he gets out of the picture. The castle is in sight now, and we're ready to make the final push. Every unit will be able to participate in the battle, so make sure their equipment is in order. There are a shop and armory on this map, but it's only towards the end of it. The enemies are nothing out of the ordinary, but there's a good variety of them, so it'll challenge your positioning. What's more is that there is rain that will happen occasionally, reducing you and your enemy's movement speed by half, slowing both sides temporarily. It will let up here and there. Lynn will tell you when it'll happen. There are many archers on the way, so Florina might have some trouble here. At least, there's no ballista to watch out for, and you could always make her cross the river southward once the rain comes to harass and weaken some of the units. The village midway through gives you an energy ring, a usable item that raises the strength or magic permanently by 2 points. Use it before seizing the castle, because all your units' inventory will be lost upon finishing the chapter. After the village, you'll be able to close in on the castle by 2 ways. First one is crossing the bridges, the other is to break the snag to access the southern passage, where you'll be able to visit the shops. By this point, reinforcements will appear from the forts close to the castle. Keep breaking them all while making your way through the intermittent rain. Soon enough, there's going to be only one obstacle left in your way. Lundgren will make a stand, and boy, what a stand it'll be. His silver lance makes him intimidating at close range, as well as being hard to break through, having high defenses in general and enough skill to make his crit chances scary. He will have a lot of conversations with many of your units, so encircle him and engage at range with as much units as you can, while keeping their health high with Sarah and Nils. Use everything at your disposal to gain the advantage, such as the Lance Reaver, Magic, and Wallace to keep Lundgren busy. The previously received Energy Ring will also help you deal damage. After an arduous fight, Lundgren falls, completing our journey. We enter the castle and are greeted by Reisman, the Chancellor of the royal family. He was cooperating with our cavaliers when their communications were found by Lundgren and he was imprisoned. He leads us to the Marquis, warning us that the site is a sorry one due to the amount of poison he's been consuming. Lindis enters Lord Howsend's chambers and timidly presents herself to him, who is initially refusing to see anyone. However, he changes his tune when he hears that his granddaughter has arrived home. Only a look is enough to confirm the link between them, and a touching scene plays, marking the reunion of two family members. Lynn tells her grandfather how she and her parents lived a life together in happiness up until the end. Hausen is relieved to hear that and can then die in peace knowing her daughter had lived a happy life. Lynn, however, refuses to let her newly known family member die, stating that they have so many things to do together before such a thing happens. The will to live then reignites in him and he agrees to keep on fighting. She also decides to stay at the castle until her grandfather gets better, so her travels are really over. Florina gets employed by the house, confirming that she's going to stay with Lynn, and so does Will. But not everyone will stay. We, on the other hand, decide to keep on our travels, honing our tactical mastery along the way. Who knows, maybe our paths will cross again someday. You then get some sort of epilogue, where you will be able to see what everyone decides to do along with their battle statistics. B is the number of battles they've taken part in, W is the number of final blows they made, and L is the number of times you've lost this unit, counting the number of chapter resets you make. As an added bonus, you'll be able to see the pictures of your journey in the background, with some new ones added in the lot. From there on out, we'll change our main lord from Lynn to Eliwood. While fallen units in Lynn's route come back in Eliwood's one, from the next chapter and onwards, permadeath will be activated and your units will die at 0 health.